The most frustrating part of the student debt bailout, outside of the obvious of pulling a reverse Robin Hood to steal from the poor to give to the rich, at least according to a University of Pennsylvania analysis, is the entire premise that we're somehow correcting a fraud by doing it. Because that's Biden's sales pitch, that colleges and universities have been jacking up costs without delivering value to students, deceptively selling a product that doesn't provide the returns they promise, and he is going to hold them accountable. He'll teach them a lesson by shoveling even more federal money at them. That'll show those robbers. Once we steal from somebody else to pay off their robberies, I bet they'll cut it out. Why would they? That's an incentive to continue the scam, since we're just further insulating these schools from the market forces that would otherwise correct them. See, it turns out that a publicly subsidized nonsense degree isn't marketable precisely because it's in a nonsense field upheld only by public subsidy, not market demand. Throwing Fed bucks at the problem only perpetuates the fraud instead of allowing it the natural death that it deserves. In the name of fighting a fraud, we're just dumping money into the fraud instead. But in this particular story, it's even worse than that, actually. It's not just that we're bleeding our country financially dry to dupe a bunch of kids into dyeing their hair pink and piercing their faces for the low price of $100,000. In this case, it's that we're pumping all of that public money to subsidize the sabotage of people who are otherwise productive outside of that circus entirely, and then even further subsidizing the damages to be paid to them too. In other words, we aren't just subsidizing uselessness, we're subsidizing actual destruction too. You may recall the story of Gibson's Bakery in Oberlin, Ohio, the small town famous for the college by the same name. About half of Oberlin's 8,000 or so residents are either students or staff at the school, meaning economic viability in that town depends on the college. Get on the school's bad side and be run out of town. And that's exactly what happened to Gibson's Bakery through no fault of their own, just standing up for themselves against a criminal and being rabidly labeled racist for it. Gibson's is a small fifth-generation family bakery operating for over 130 years. Prior to this incident, they had a great relationship with the school and the community, serving walk-in customers and providing catering for various events, much of it on long-term contracts with Oberlin College, until the night after the election in 2016, November 9th, when an incident of theft changed the bakery's relationship with the school and the community in an instant. That night, Jonathan Aladdin, an underage Oberlin student, pulled the strange stunt of trying to buy a bottle of wine with a fake ID while carrying 2 other bottles stuffed into his jacket to steal them. If your plan is to steal, why walk up to the counter at all? I have no idea, but Alan Gibson, the son of the shop owner, tried to take a photo of this attempted theft in progress. Aladdin slapped the phone out of Gibson's hand. I don't know if a boo helped at all, but he ran out of the store and Gibson pursued. Gibson caught him and held on to him until 2 other Oberlin students, Cecilia Whetstone and Endia Lawrence, came and assisted the thief Aladdin. And by assist, I mean helped to kick Gibson's ass. According to the police report, when cops arrived, the trio was kneeled over Gibson, repeatedly punching and kicking him. He had various injuries, including a swollen lip. The 3 were then charged for the theft and assault. Alan Gibson was charged with nothing, and thus the narrative was born. It wasn't that a guy who tried to steal and his friends who helped him beat a shopkeep were being held accountable for their crimes. No, instead it was that Gibson's Bakery, with the cooperation of the police department, had racially profiled all of them. And so the misinformed mob did what misinformed mobs do and descended upon the bakery the very next day, calling the bakery racist, white supremacist, and demanding accountability from the bakery for how a shoplifter and his violent counterparts were treated. But this wasn't as simple as just idiot kids doing idiot kid things. The mob actually had points of participation from Oberlin College itself. The school immediately canceled its accounts and contracts with the bakery. Professors participated in the protests. At least one school administrator, the dean of students, Meredith Raimondo, not only participated in the protests, but facilitated them on school time and with school resources. She provided protesters with supplies. She distributed flyers that urged boycott, accusing Gibson's of a long history of racial profiling and discrimination. And according to a reporter, this dean of students blocked him from taking photographs of the protest. And according to the bakery's eventual lawsuit complaint, those flyers accusing them of a long history of racism were distributed by college staff beyond just the dean of students as well, and printed using college resources. Now, of course, none of these racism accusations were true, not just in this particular instance of theft, but in general either. We know this was not a racist incident because the thief and his assistants admitted as much in court. They pled guilty to their charges and stated they believed the Gibson family was justified, and their actions were not racially motivated. The accusations of racism came as news at the time to a black bakery employee who said, "Hey, we don't profile based on race. We just profile based on criminal activity."
This is a real simple story. A kid got caught shoplifting. He got arrested.
Some white shoplifters arrested this week as well, he points out.
We're equal opportunity criminal profiler. When you shoplift, you get caught, you get busted.
And speaking of these busts, the information from the police department demonstrates the opposite of what these flyers claimed is actually true. There is no long history of Gibson's racial profiling. In fact, there wasn't a single record of such an allegation ever with the Oberlin police. There is, however, a very long history of Oberlin students stealing from this shop and many others in the community. In the 5 years prior to this event, 40 adults were arrested for shoplifting at Gibson's. 33 of those were Oberlin students. Of those, only 6 were black. That's actually almost perfectly demographically proportionate to the community. So if this bakery is trying to profile only black people to bust them, they aren't doing a very good job with the racism. But of course, all of that demonstration is with the benefit of factual hindsight nearly 6 years later. The truth is completely exonerating for the bakery, but of course we know that's not how these things work. The viral smear is spread to all of its consequences before the truth is ever considered, and in this case, that nearly cost the Gibson family their business. As I mentioned, without the college, you effectively don't do business in that town. The protests continued, and a student resolution declaring the bakery racist was displayed prominently in the student center for a year. In a recent essay for the New York Post, Lorna Gibson, Alan's mother and now manager of the business, describes how, without any traffic from the school, sales at the bakery dried up completely. She had to let go of half the employees and cut hours. The family took a sick member of their staff into their home. And the father and son, who carried on the family business from 1885, died watching their life's work smeared as racist. David, Lorna's husband and Alan's father, died in 2019 from pancreatic cancer, treatment for which he paused to participate fully in the defamation lawsuit that the family filed. His dying wish was for his wife to keep the doors open at the bakery no matter what. His father, Alan Sr., died recently at age 93. He left his grandson, Alan, the man who tried to stop the shoplifter sparking this entire ordeal, with last words to do good, honest work. And, by all accounts, the family has. They have now finally succeeded in their defamation lawsuit against the school, but that wasn't their first option. The family tried in good faith to negotiate some sort of peace, but Oberlin College didn't reciprocate. The college said they would only agree to reinstate a business relationship if the bakery agreed to drop any charges against the shoplifter and his accomplices. The family did not accept. The college made a proposal that all local businesses, including Gibson's, should work through the school on shoplifting cases and not call police. The family did not accept. Without any options for good faith resolution, the family filed a defamation lawsuit against the school in 2017, getting a jury verdict in their favor in 2019 for about $32 million. And I haven't reviewed the entire trial or the entire case. And again, this is analysis by a layman, not a professional. But in general, for a successful defamation lawsuit, you need to demonstrate 4 elements. You need a false statement purporting to be fact. Check that in the form of an accusation not just of racism, but specifically a long history of racism. You need publication or communication of that statement to a third party. Check that in the form of the flyers and standing outside the bakery trying to stop business traffic. You need fault amounting to at least negligence. Check that in the form of no evidence or even an attempt to provide any to support the claim of a long history of racism. And you need some demonstrated harm. Check that too, in the form of a multi-generational family business all but destroyed. I don't know the jury's exact reasoning in this case, but the decision was likely something along those lines. The school did not surrender, though. They still fought their liability for years after that verdict. In 2020, Oberlin challenged the decision in the Ohio Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The decision was upheld. In June of this year, 2022, Oberlin appealed the decision to the Ohio Supreme Court, and in August, the Ohio Supreme Court declined to hear the case. Oberlin's argument, as far as I understand it, was twofold. One, that the school was not responsible for the speech. It was simply that of the students. Not only did the school not make the defamatory statements, they argued, but they have an obligation to protect the student free speech that produced it. And two, that the statements weren't defamatory anyway because the Gibsons were public figures. Now, in defamation law, public figures have a higher bar to prove defamation than the general public. They have to show what's called actual malice, or that the false statements were known to be false when they were made, or that they were made with reckless disregard for the truth, not simply negligence. And I'm not surprised that these arguments failed in court because they're not particularly strong. The school was directly involved in the smear, not just by the implication of a school administrator's participation, the dean of students, but by the school's own acknowledgement that she did this in her official capacity. The college president said the dean of students participated in the protest, officially representing the school because the student handbook requires her to. Yeah, well, who made the policy in the student handbook? The school did. If the student handbook instructed the dean of students to rob the bakery too, it wouldn't justify the robbery. As far as public figures and actual malice, that argument is flimsy too. To say that the Gibsons are public figures simply because they operate a business, which, as far as I understand, was the argument from the college, is to say that everybody is. If merely participating in a small town business that's open to the public puts you on the same level of public notoriety as, say, a politician or a movie star, then as a matter of law, this public figure distinction is meaningless and should be scrapped entirely. And even if the Gibsons are public figures, there's a good case that this defamation was done with actual malice anyway. The school and the students said the Gibson family had a long history of racism. They knew that statement was false. They never produced a shred of evidence to support it. And they made that statement with the sole and ongoing intent of ruining the business. That is as actually malicious as it gets. But left with only poor arguments and expired legal paths, Oberlin finally gave up this week. They released a statement saying they are conceding the case and paying the Gibson family nearly $37 million, the jury's award plus interest. The school's statement reads like the bitter complaints of an ostrich with its head still in the sand, but completely out of options, not like a good faith attempt at any sort of resolution. Note the words that don't appear in this statement: sorry, apologize, condolences, none of these. Only disappointment with the state Supreme Court for not siding with them, and regret for the pain of everyone, themselves included. Not the specific pain for this family that their recklessness inflicted. For her part, Lorna Gibson says she'll use this money for nothing other than the revival of the business. She says she doesn't want to buy a new house or go on vacation or just pack up and leave permanently. She just wants to buy supplies and hire workers and make good on her promise to her late husband and father-in-law that she will carry on their life's work to the next generation. And I'm sure she will. Now, as convinced as I am that justice was served in this case, I do want to consider the other side, though, because, of course, free speech principles are crucially important to defend. First Amendment rights are what Oberlin College cited in court, and I do agree that any exceptions or limitations ought to be crafted as carefully and specifically as possible. But if you believe in any sort of defamation standard at all, Oberlin's case falls short. The core of what the First Amendment protects is viewpoint, even wrong or false viewpoint. To that end, if this was simply Oberlin's students and staff saying, "We think the Gibson family is racist," fine, fair enough, you're entitled to that. The core of defamation is something beyond just viewpoint, though. It's actual damage. It's taking that viewpoint, when demonstrably false, and applying it to do financial harm to somebody else. Defamation isn't just about what you think. It's about taking what you think and trying to ruin somebody with it. If we believe that is a meaningful and worthwhile distinction, if we believe that defamation is a valid First Amendment exception at all, then this is it. A false claim pushed without evidence for the purpose of stopping business, much of that pushing done physically in front of the store in literal obstruction. If that's not legally defamatory, then nothing is, and will just enable mobs to ruin livelihoods on their whims, which is exactly what this case is about. Whether you have a right not just to have an opinion about a business or to abstain from supporting that business through association if you so choose, but to actively ruin it. Nothing about this case is criminal. Nobody's going to jail. It's just about whether there's responsibility for financial damages if you actively sabotage other people's property and reputations. If you want to believe in your own delusional head or in your own delusional writings, your own delusional speeches, that somebody is racist, you go right ahead. But if you want to try to stop the next guy from freely associating on account of your fact-free delusions, well then, you bring the receipts. That is a standard that respects the rights of everybody. It respects your right to be an idiot, and it respects the rights of the people you hate to associate freely regardless. And I have no doubt that students and staff at Oberlin will be freely and fully exercising their right to be idiots for many years to come. Because after all, after they cut this check, they have a near infinite mailbox of federal bailout checks to fall back on. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Minds. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chatting my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.